Good morning, club members. We digest world-class journalism and talk it through in plain English. Here are 5 stories worth your time. 4 American tech giants spent $95 billion, more than they earned last quarter. Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft and Meta poured vast sums of cash into artificial intelligence. Their combined spending on data centers and hardware doubled over the past year. To pay for these giant facilities, the companies took on heavy new loans. Their total long-term debt doubled in just 1 year to $350 billion. The head of Amazon explained that demand for computing power is outstripping supply. He expects this shortage to last through 2026 and into 2027. To keep up, the 4 giants plan to spend $760 billion this year. That is an 85% increase compared to their spending last year. It is an enormous gamble on the future of digital infrastructure. Yet these massive investments are not paying off in the same way for everyone. Companies with large cloud computing networks are already seeing clear financial rewards. Cloud services let businesses rent computing power to build their own software. Microsoft and Amazon both watched their cloud revenues jump dramatically in recent months. Amazon now makes over $25 billion a year just from its custom chips. Investors cheered these results and pushed Microsoft stock to a record single-day gain. For Meta, however, the story looks quite different. Meta does not sell cloud computing services to other companies. Instead, it pays rising bills to train its models and hire expensive specialists. That extra spending caused its operating profit to drop for the first time in 3 years. Its borrowing costs have climbed as a result, with bond interest rates reaching 7%. This creates a clear divide among the world's biggest technology firms. Building modern artificial intelligence requires hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. If a company owns the underlying cloud network, it can turn that spending into immediate revenue. Without a cloud business, a firm must carry the heavy costs alone and hope for future profits. The big question is whether investors will remain patient as corporate debt continues to rise. We will soon see if this investment surge builds lasting value or unsustainable financial pressure. From tech spending, we turn to European security for our second topic today. A Russian cruise missile recently struck a quiet field in southeastern Poland. The weapon landed 57 miles inside the Polish border with Ukraine. It created a crater 10 meters wide near the village of Tarnowa Kolonia. Fortunately, no one was hurt and no buildings were damaged. Polish radar also tracked a second missile that turned away in time. Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated the missile likely veered off course during an attack. Russian forces were targeting cities in western Ukraine overnight. NATO leaders moved quickly to condemn the strike on Polish soil. Secretary-General Mark Rutte called the incident a reckless act by Moscow. He warned that stray weapons are a dangerous consequence of the war. Russian officials haven't commented on the strike so far. This stray missile is part of a broader pattern along eastern borders. Just 1 week ago, Russian drones crossed into Romanian airspace 3 times. During the first incident, a Romanian jet shot down an incoming drone. The next night, Italian and Romanian fighters scrambled to intercept more targets. NATO aircraft destroyed several unmanned systems over Romanian territory. Romania later summoned the Russian ambassador and presented recovered wreckage. They also expelled a Russian diplomat to send a firm diplomatic message. Border breaches are becoming uncomfortably common for Eastern NATO members. 11 months ago, Russian warplanes briefly violated Estonian airspace. Last summer, NATO troops took direct military action against drones over Poland. Why do these border incidents create so much tension among military commanders? NATO operates on a strict policy of collective defence. An attack on one member country counts as an attack on all members. Until now, these stray missiles and drones have landed in empty fields. Military analysts fear that good fortune won't last forever. A single off-course missile could easily hit a populated town or power plant. If an errant strike causes civilian casualties, NATO will face a tough choice. Leaders would need to decide whether to launch a significant military response. That choice could draw 30 alliance members into direct conflict with Russia. Neither side wants an accidental war to begin over a targeting error. Yet as long as fighting rages nearby, the risk of escalation remains real. For now, NATO air defences remain on high alert across Eastern Europe. Moving from the missile strike in Poland, our third story takes us to Southeast Asia. Indonesia launched an ambitious national plan to give free school meals to every child. President Prabowo Subianto made this pledge the centerpiece of his presidential campaign in 2024. He wanted to fight child malnutrition and stunting across the fourth most populous nation. It sounded like an unimpeachable idea for a country with millions of poor families. However, just 18 months after taking power, the flagship project has become a disaster. Instead of improving health, bad food has triggered widespread illness in towns and villages. More than 40,000 children have suffered from severe food poisoning after eating the meals. So how did a well-meaning lunch program go so terribly wrong? The root cause comes down to flawed design and lack of government oversight. The government created a new National Nutrition Agency to manage the entire operation. However, officials gave private kitchen contracts to their own political allies and family foundations. The military and police also took control of running hundreds of school kitchens. At least 7 kitchen foundations were tied directly to the president's own political party. Without proper safety checks, many operators bought low-quality food to make higher profits. The corruption quickly caught the attention of federal prosecutors in June. The head of the Nutrition Agency and 2 deputies were named as criminal suspects. Investigators found they awarded lucrative contracts directly to foundations that they owned. After the agency chief was removed, the new director quit after just 45 days. She stated that the immense stress of running the chaotic scheme left her traumatized. The financial strain on the nation is also becoming a major headache. The government originally budgeted nearly $13 billion to feed 83 million people. The scheme currently reaches about 63 million children across the vast archipelago. Now ministers plan to trim the budget and scale back the numbers significantly. Unsurprisingly, public approval for the school meal program has fallen off a cliff. Support dropped from over 62% last November down to 34% this week. More than 60% of voters now express deep dissatisfaction with the government. President Prabowo promised to nourish a new generation of Indonesian children. Instead, he faces a damaged reputation, a ballooning budget, and thousands of sick pupils. He must now decide whether to rebuild the agency or abandon his signature promise. For our fourth story today, we move from food safety in Indonesia to North Africa. Spain controls a small coastal enclave named Ceuta, which sits right next to Morocco. About 84,000 people live permanently in this small Spanish territory. Recently, an uncontrollable flood of over 50,000 migrants arrived in just 2 days. That massive number created an immediate crisis for local emergency services and police. The sudden influx began after a major ruling by Spain's highest court. Judges declared that laws allowing fast deportations do not apply to arrivals by sea. They argued that people swimming around barriers do not break physical border fences. Information about this legal loophole spread quickly on social media across Morocco. Large groups of hopeful migrants began gathering near the northern border very quickly. The situation escalated when Moroccan border guards reportedly stopped patrolling during a holiday. Without guards in place, thousands of families simply walked or swam around the breakwater. Tragically, police report that at least 34 people drowned during the desperate swim. Spanish border officers were completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of arrivals. Officers ended up waving people through while handing out water and basic sandwiches. Many migrants spent the night sleeping on park benches and along public streets. Spain's government was initially slow to react because leaders were fighting serious wildfires. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez soon flew to Ceuta to inspect the growing crisis. He ordered extra patrol boats to the area and deployed soldiers to secure streets. Spanish officials held urgent talks with Moroccan leaders to organize immediate deportations. So far, the government says over 48,000 people have been returned to Morocco. However, sending back the remaining migrants will likely prove far more difficult. This crisis has exposed deep political divisions between Spain and its European partners. Pedro Sánchez has usually welcomed immigration as a way to boost economic growth. He even introduced plans earlier this year to give legal status to irregular workers. In the past, European leaders supported Spain and called its borders European borders. This time, however, neighbouring nations are responding with anger and strict new limits. Italy announced that it is suspending free travel agreements with Spain. Italian officials are now introducing mandatory passport checks for all boat and plane passengers. Italian leaders even suggested removing Spain from Europe's open border area entirely. Meanwhile, France has tightened security controls along its shared land border with Spain. Politicians across the continent are warning that open policies encourage illegal crossings. This intense pressure leaves the Spanish government facing a very delicate choice. Leaders must protect national borders without losing the trust of their European allies. After looking at border pressures in Spain, we turn to energy for our final story today. Italy is planning to bring back nuclear power after decades of banning atomic energy. Why is the Italian government changing its mind on nuclear energy now? The biggest reason comes down to very high electricity bills for families and businesses. Italian households pay power bills that are about 30% higher than the European average. That price difference happens because the nation relies heavily on imported natural gas. Right now, fossil fuels still generate about half of all electricity used across Italy. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni wants to solve this energy crisis with modern nuclear power. Her government is backing small, modular reactors, which are compact nuclear units built in factories. Supporters say these smaller reactors are safer than older designs. They also argue that atomic energy requires much less space than giant wind farms. Some property owners complain that endless wind turbines and solar panels damage scenic rural views. In June, the lower house of Parliament approved a framework law for atomic energy. The Senate is expected to give its final approval to the law next week. After that, ministers will have 12 months to create safety rules and waste disposal plans. Only then can energy companies apply for official licenses to build actual reactors. Local industrial firms are already showing strong interest in buying these small power units. Energy-intensive businesses like steel factories and cement makers need cheap and steady power. One Franco-Italian startup has raised $780 million to build modern reactors. Their novel design aims to produce low-carbon energy by burning recycled nuclear waste. However, this policy shift faces strong opposition from climate activists and green energy firms. Critics argue that small modular reactors are still unproven on a commercial scale. They also emphasize that solar power is already the cheapest source of electricity available today. Italian industry groups warn that businesses cannot afford to wait 10 years for nuclear plants. Italy must now choose between waiting for future reactors or expanding solar energy right away. That brings us to the end of our episode today. Thank you for spending your morning with me on the English Breakfast Club. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to our chat tomorrow.